Mesdames, Messieurs, bonsoir. This is Dragon Keeper 9600 with a film commentary for the 1987 animated film, The Phantom of the Opera. This is the only animated adaptation of the Gaston Leroux novel, or the Phantom of the Opera story, since this story has kind of way outlasted the novel itself. And as you can see, it's gorgeous. This is some top-notch animation that we're looking at. In terms of animation, I see a lot of people comparing it to Scooby-Doo, which is embarrassing because this came out a decade after Scooby-Doo, so yeah. Several people have done commentaries on this very website because of this movie's weirdness factor, and I'm going to be adding to that number. This is not a reaction video, though, because I've actually already seen this. But this is a fan commentary? I am a fan of the Phantom of the Opera story, not of this movie, because, I mean... So, this is not feature length. It's actually 48 minutes. Wow, it's even shorter than I thought. This was a made-for-TV movie put out by a company called Emerald City Productions, which has since gone defunct. I'm not sure why. Clearly their work is stellar. Okay, that was kind of mean. But I looked them up on IMDb Pro because I was curious who the fuck would put out an adaptation of Phantom of the Opera, presumably for children, though I'm not sure if there's anything that really typifies this as for children. Ah yes, chaos on the Seine today as time has frozen completely. Except for those birds. Those birds are immune to time freezing. Anyway, Emerald City is a company, and during their very short lifespan, seems to have mostly produced public domain, classic works for children, most of which are very short. One of the things that they did right before they closed was Ben-Hur, animated and for children. But what really boggles the mind most is that they did an adaptation of Les Miserables, that is, again, animated for kids, and the running time listed in IMDb Pro is 60 minutes for Les Miserables. How the fuck do you do that? What? How can you tell Les Miserables in 60 minutes? You know what? That's the novel that they called The Brick, right? It's 1,400 pages. How in God's green earth do you fit 1,400 pages in? Hey, speaking, look, it's Notre Dame. Wait, why is the Eiffel Tower there? Asshole, if this is 1890, the Eiffel Tower... Well, has it been built yet? I actually don't remember when it was built. Maybe it has been. I don't know. Didn't we see this shot already? Anyway. Yeah, I don't know how you fit Les Miserables. Like, what is even left of the story at that truncated length? I'm actually really curious to see it, but, like, so far this Phantom of the Opera film is the only work of Emerald City that's on YouTube.
It'll teach the horse the way. We shall be returning in just a few hours.
Because the horse is driving itself to the opera house? Oh, God. Don't do that again, Christine. You're terrifying.
Great surprise for you.
Oh? What is it?
So, a lot of people praise this adaptation for being very close to the novel. Like, very close. Like, maybe the closest of any adaptation. And I've seen a lot of people praise it for that. Like, oh, it's so accurate. That makes it good. It's not good, though. Like, I'm going to tell you something really mind-blowing right now. And I want you to remember this. Ready? Are you listening? Listen good. Just because an adaptation is accurate does not make it good. It's gotta be good. If it's accurate, it's just a bonus. But when you're adapting shit, you gotta change it around. And I would argue that a writer needs to feel free to change whatever they want if it fits the format and story. And I honestly feel like adaptation could suffer from being too literal. However, in this case, I don't think the problems of the film can be tracked down to the accuracy of the adaptation, but just to the very limited presentation.
I have seen you in your box. You really are a faithful friend.
Just a friend, Raoul. Don't get any ideas. Look at these costumes. I'm sure they're very period accurate. That is something that I believe. So Christine never has her hair down at any point in this novel. I mean, in this film, because that would be too hard to draw. Sure, a lot of people milling outside. I guess I sat in the carriage for a while. Not a word was spoken. The church bells all were broken. So a lot of, I'm going to be pretty negative on this thing, but a lot of these still painted shots are really nice. Like the shot of the sand earlier, which was so nice, they used it twice. And the shot of the interior of the entrance here. It is a little weird to see our moving characters in front of backgrounds full of things that should be moving, but are clearly not. So, unlike Les Miserables, which they could trunk in 60 minutes, it's much easier to truncate the Phantom of the Opera down to 48 minutes, because the novel is much shorter, and it's really pretty simple. Plus, there's a lot of, like, scenes with, like, the two owners here. Like, whole chapters of the novel are devoted to just them. And the movie, like a lot of adaptations, very wisely cuts those because no one cares. There are... So the thing about the Gaston Leroux novel that all Phantom of the Opera adaptations are supposedly based on is that it's not that great. And it was Gaston Leroux, the guy who wrote it, was known as sort of a mediocre mystery writer. And Phantom of the Opera wasn't even considered his best work. The version of the novel I have, which was put out by Barnes & Noble, it comes with contemporary reviews that came out after the full novel was released. And there's at least a few people who compare it not that favorably to stuff he's already written. Let me see if I can find them. Okay. Okay. Monsieur Leroux owes to the world another detective story as good as The Mystery of the Yellow Room and better than The Perfume of the Lady in Black. So The Mystery of the Yellow Room seems to be the work that most people are saying Phantom of the Opera is not as good as. This story didn't really take off until the 1925 silent film adaptation, which came out a whole 2 years before Gaston Leroux's death. Oh. Wait a minute. What did he do to that cat? Am I to understand that the Phantom is so ugly that the cat died? Once there was an ugly barnacle. He was so ugly that everyone died. The end. Funny thing about that episode is it actually does reference the Phantom of the Opera, if you remember, because it's got SpongeBob at the organ with the cape, except when he turns around, he's wearing the Groucho Marx glasses instead of a mask. Help! We're frozen! So one of the things about adapting this novel literally is that some of the elements are very ridiculous. Like the way that Eric's eyes here are glowing in the dark. That is from the novel, where he says that his eyes are yellow and can only be seen properly in the dark, where they glow. Keep in mind, the Phantom is not supposed to be a supernatural entity at all. But then you have details like that, like, yeah, this was written by somebody in 1910. A lot of people think the story is older than it really is. This version takes place in 1890. The Barnes & Noble edition, which includes commentary from scholars in French literature, estimates that the novel takes place sometime between 1882 and 1885. But the story itself was published in a serialized format between 1910 and 1911. And if you don't know what serialized means, it's kind of a practice that's fallen out of fashion here in the States. But basically, they would release the novel one chapter at a time in like a newspaper or something. So like every, I don't know how often it was published, a week, let's say, you'd be like, boy, I can't wait to read the next chapter of Phantom of the Opera. That's a practice that still exists in the West with fan fiction. And, but not with novels. Nowadays, when you publish a novel, they expect you to publish the whole thing at once. Oops. With a star on the door. I'm sure that's accurate.
I wish to see Mademoiselle Dae.
I assume this is Madame Giry, but maybe not. A lot of the characters that got focused in the novel don't get focused on the version because 48 minutes, and also because it doesn't matter anyway. So, Raoul is kind of I know Raoul is one of the most disliked characters in this story. If you're talking about the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, there are a whole lot of people who are like, fuck Raoul, Phantom is so much better. I believe that those people think that the Raoul in the musical is like the Raoul in the novel, or in this version. Because the Raoul in this version kind of sucks. Hang on. Let me read you some of the commentary from the novel I have on Raoul. Because it's pretty great. The commentary for this novel is written by a lady named Isabelle Roche. Here's what she says. If I can find it.
How dare you enter without permission?
Where is he? Where are you hiding him?
Okay, here it is. Modern readers are sure to find the character of Raoul, with his endless fits of jealousy, ineffectual outbursts, swoons, and whiny rants, to be largely uninteresting and unlikable. For in contrast to the evolution witnessed in Eric and that of Christine, whose naivete and innocence are steadily supplanted by an impressive presence of mind and notable artistic, romantic, and human maturation, Raoul remains from beginning to end static. Yeah, not a Raoul fan, huh, Isabel?
Childhood friendship.
And she goes on to argue that Raoul is made unlikable.
I don't want to hear it.
Look at how entitled he's acting here. Like, I love you. That means you instantly have to be with me.
Christine, who is this man who asked you to love him?
Now, Isabel argues that Raoul is written that way to make Eric seem more sympathetic by contrast.
Music.
What?
I think this version also cuts the backstory with Christine's father, who promised her that the angel of music would come and teach her.
He gives me lessons every night, here in my dressing room. I thought I was the only one to hear his voice.
Oh, you're crazy. Hey, yeah.
Somebody is making a fool.
So, as I was saying...
You don't need anybody to make a fool of you. Do you think
Oh, yeah, you could tell they're gonna end up together.
you can see there is no...
So, yeah, they cut the backstory where Christine's dad, basically, when she was a kid, and again, I say, haha,
Get out.
told her about this figure he called the Angel of Music, which was sort of this muse that appears to people and, like, basically teaches them the ways of music. And he says that everybody with musical talent was at one point in their life visited by the Angel of Music. So when Christine hears a voice singing at her through the walls of her dressing room, she assumes that it's the Angel of Music that her dad was talking about.
You must not take away my private box. Be warned.
Did I not instruct that box 5 was to remain empty?
How dare he? The villain! He does not frighten me.
He killed a guy! Police? Do something? Well, I mean, they're right there, so I guess they are doing something. I killed a guy. Don't take my box.
Christine, it is I. Are you ready?
Yes,
To rock?
I am ready.
Come first, Christine. Tonight, you come to me.
And I do mean come. So one of the parts of the stage musical that really, I think, is what really rocketed the story into mass popularity adds is this sexual tension between Eric and Christine. What's interesting about the novel, and to a lesser extent this version, is that Eric, because that's the Phantom's name, in case you're not aware, if you're watching this, you're probably aware, is largely uninterested in sex. Like, he mostly just loves Christine because,
Are you?
her singing voice. 2, he wants to have a wife so he can be a normal guy. Like, that's like his main dream, is to like take his wife out to the park on Sundays. This is what he says, word for word in the novel. And like just
Don't touch
play chess with her and like do things that married people do. And never once does he mention sex. It's only at the very end where he even kisses her. And it's not even on the lips. It's on the forehead. And he is so blown away by the kiss on the forehead because no woman has ever let him kiss her. Which is, and the downplaying of the sexiness in this version, I think it works for this version because it makes him less creepy, because what he wants from her is not that carnality, but he just wants a normal, wholesome relationship. Now, I would argue that the sexuality of the musical version is a necessary component to that particular telling of the story, because you have this version of Christine who's repulsed by him, but also attracted to him at the same time, and that's a fascinating dynamic. Whereas in this version, the attraction is mostly based on pity. She can't bear to leave him because he's such a tragic figure that she feels like, I think, like, she says, like, he would surely die of the heartbreak if I left him. But even then, she recognizes that she has to leave him for her own safety. But it kills her to do it. And this novel was written, I think, before Stockholm Syndrome was actually coined. But clearly the phenomenon was already recognized because it's all over the place in Christine's relationship with the Phantom. How, like, he actually... They're not going to portray that in this movie, but in the novel, the first night that he brings her to his underground house on the lake, she demands to be let go immediately, and he lets her go, but then she remembers that this is the same voice who sang to her, so she actually stays the night. And that she, like, keeps going back to him because she feels so bad for him.
And I shall play for you.
So the mask that he wears in the novel is described as being... not really described very well, but it's described as being black and covering the whole face. Whereas, not this V for Vendetta thing he's got going on here. Also, if you notice, he's wearing a pretty similar outfit to the one Raoul wore when he threw his "Why won't you love me?" fit. I don't know if that's intentional or not. With this version, who knows? It could have been intentional, but it also could have been, I don't feel like drawing two outfits. Let's just put him in the same thing and then give him a Darkwing Duck cape and hat. That's a beautiful run cycle, Christine. It hurts when I move. Hi again.
Did you have a nice walk?
So if you look at...
What do you want of me?
So most people who are fans of the musical know this, but the half mask that you see in all productions of the stage musical was an invention of that musical. Because of the limitations of stage, they wanted to be able to show at least some of his face for the sake of acting. But in the novel and in this version, not only is his entire face deformed, but his whole body is deformed. He's got some kind of disorder where he basically has no body fat, and his skin is really shitty too. So he just looks like a living skeleton. And I do like in the unnecessary preview they showed before this movie started that they didn't actually show his face. So you gotta watch the movie to see what the face is.
What kind of a man are you? What honest man covers his face?
Honestly, Christine, you don't sound very scared that you've been taken underground by the weird man with gray hands.
Afraid of? Have you not made me your prisoner?
She just seems mildly annoyed that she's been abducted. I mean, she did faint earlier, but I think it was only because it said for the script that she should faint. Well, this is going great. I'm really crying. Do you believe me? Oh,
Look at me. You wanted to know what I look like. Feast your eyes and...
oh, the camera's rotating. Oh, help! Wow, that was so fancy the way the camera rotated there. So, some people in the comments of the original upload of this movie have wondered how, I don't know how accurate this dialogue is to the novel. I'll tell you right now, a lot of it is word for word. Like this speech that Eric is giving right now of when a woman has seen me, she belongs to me. That is taken word for word from the English translation of the novel. However, it kind of skips around erratically, which in some ways works because Eric is kind of a massive mood swinger. It's just very socially awkward. Now, Eric's voice actor, whose name I don't remember, is the only one in this thing who sounds like he's actually awake and trying. Because everybody else just sounds...
Now that you know my hideousness.
It's not the worst voice acting I've ever heard. God, that would be something. But they do sound just like they're going paint by numbers. It's like a few steps below Oblivion voice acting, where the actors were just recording things without knowing the context. I do love this shot before looking away like... Did he not see that? So, the fact that Christine feels so bad for the Phantom that she pities him is something that does not come across due to the limited animation and the limited voice acting. Because it doesn't really sound like Christine pities him or that she feels for him. It just sounds like I said earlier, like she's mildly annoyed. Furthermore, because of the limited presentation of everything, Christine doesn't really seem like someone like Eric would be obsessed with. Like, Christine in the novel is like this strong, independent woman who nonetheless is taken in by just the tragedy of Eric. And she keeps returning to him voluntarily, like I said, because she can't bear to leave him. This version, she's just kind of... Right away, she's like, I want to go. I don't want this anymore. It's just out. That could work if it felt like it was intentional. Because Christine doesn't seem like a remarkable woman that these men would be willing to kill for. She just seems like a very normal person. And it doesn't help that the singing is obviously taken from like a public domain track or something. And that I don't believe for a minute that she was singing that part on stage she said she was. Now, having a totally normal woman in this situation could potentially work. I'm reminded of the 1933 film Mad Love, which had Peter Lorre as this mad doctor who was obsessed with this woman who, like, he falls in love with her because he sees her in, like, this very smutty kind of stage show. And, like, the actual woman herself is, like, very mundane. Like, you see her, like, smoking before she goes on stage in her dressing room, and she's, like, already married. And when she's actually talking to him, she, like, talks like a normal person in the 30s does. Like, I can't wait to be rid of the whole wretched business. So, like, the idea is that he's in love with the, like, with, like, his own fantasy of her as opposed to the woman herself. But in this version... The Phantom's love is supposed to be, like, redeeming in some way to his character, and it's supposed to be genuine. So, like, it doesn't... Deviation from the novel. She said to wear a harlequin costume, where in the novel she said to wear a white domino. This version immediately sucks. Also, it was pretty dumb of Christine to tell him all this in her own dressing room where she knows for a fact the Phantom can hear her. In the novel, she had this version on the roof of the opera house, which is still kind of stupid because, like, obviously he could get up there, but at least he had the excuse that she was away from the lower levels where she lived, and they were outside and away from her dressing room. Boy, that costume looks pretty rough. You have to have a certain type of charisma to be able to carry a Harley Quinn costume and not look like a twat. It can look very sexy if you see it on, like, the 90s version of Harley Quinn. It's like, oh yeah, that looks good. Not on these guys so much. I love the parties where people just stand around and kind of mutter.
Do not touch me. I am the red.
Interesting tidbit here. In the novel, it actually says, do not touch me for I am the Red Death on the back of the cape. Like, it's stitched there. Good to know that no matter what version you're watching, the Phantom is ridiculously extra. Everybody at this party is just like, yeah, we're gonna let this happen. I have a pointy hat. I wonder who that could be. Now, the structure of this, like most adaptations, is very different from the structure of the novel. Oh, hello. Hi, I'm important. I'm just going to loom here. So...
He is the Persian. No one knows.
So this adaptation, like a lot of others, mostly focuses through Christine's perspective. Like, when Eric first approaches Christine is when we see Eric for the first time, and so on and so forth. The actual novel has a structure that I would compare more to, like, a Scooby-Doo novel. And for, like, most of it, it's from Raoul's perspective, which you could argue is a flaw because, as Isabelle Roche so eloquently said, Raoul is terrible. In this version. Eiffel Tower again. Is that an anachronism? I don't remember when the World's Exposition in Paris was, so I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and not only that, did I say that the structure was like a Scooby-Doo episode yet?
I have decided.
It is. So, like, half the novel is Raoul, like, wondering why Christine is ghosting. Get it? Him. Like, she shows up here, and she, like, won't talk to him, and, like, what's the connection with the angel and the ghost, and what's going on? And, like, it even does the Scooby-Doo thing where it shows, like, several supernatural instances happening, such as the chandelier falling, or he magics away a bunch of money that he blackmailed from the owners. And, like, it seems like it's a supernatural ghostly thing, but then later on the novel explains how he did it. So you see, like, the supernatural thing with a ghost haunting a building, which is the main motivation of most villains of Scooby-Doo. It's like to scare someone off of a property, except in this story, it's to scare people to, like, comply with his demands on the property. And then eventually that person is unmasked. The amusement park owner. And then it's revealed, like, the human reason that they did it. Except, so it's like the Phantom in the novel and in this version is just a particularly tragic Scooby-Doo villain, which sometimes happens, like the villains have sympathetic motives, especially in the later series. Most versions omit this mystery style because it does kind of make things drag for a while. And, like, the mystery is not as compelling as the character itself. So I think it is wiser for the adaptations to focus more on the love triangle and, like, portray the Phantom as a man earlier on. Now, the one trick that they very pointedly don't explain in the novel is how he made the chandelier fall. In this version, he seems to be making the chain break through the force, I guess. Because he just stares at it and then the link breaks. In the novel, the Persian, the character that we've seen looming around in this version, I really care about this, asks Eric if he made the chandelier fall, and Eric gives a very non-committal answer like, oh, it was very old and it broke, it's not my fault. But it's, like, clearly portrayed in a way that, like, oh, wow, that is not the voice I expected to come out of that girl.
Where is Mademoiselle Dai? Did you see where she went?
She has vanished, disappeared. The ghost has taken her.
All three of you are clearly voiced by the same woman. Was it really hard to get someone who could even remotely sound like a kid? Jeez. So about the chandelier. The chandelier falling, which is one of the most iconic parts of the story in multiple adaptations, was based on a real incident in, let me look it up right here. Can't really find it.
For something, Monsieur le Count?
Okay, yes. By an incident that happened in 1886 when, due to a wiring problem, the chandelier fell into the audience. In the novel, they mention that one person died from this disaster. I'm recording a commentary right now.
I know him.
And that it was the new concierge that they hired to replace Madame Giry, who has been truncated from this version.
I recognize the monster.
So this guy, the Persian, is the character that Lindsay Ellis has apparently called on her video the most whitewashed character in history. This guy gets left out of most adaptations, including the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, which is crazy because he's kind of the real hero in some ways. Like, Raoul is useless, and he keeps making all these empty threats about how I'm gonna kill the Phantom, how dare he touch you, Christine. But this guy just comes in and he's like, yeah, just sit down and don't hurt yourself. Madame Giry and the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical actually takes up the Persian's role, is that she's the one who knows the Phantom's backstory and who leads Raoul down to the final lair. But as opposed to, unlike Madame Giry, who is clearly still terrified of the Phantom, The Persian is afraid of what the Phantom could do, but doesn't seem to be afraid of the Phantom himself. And he, like, actually escorts Raoul all the way down to where the Phantom lives in the lake and below the Opera House, because Raoul is so incompetent that there's no way he could have made it there without this guy holding his hand. So the Persian very potently doesn't have a name. Apparently in the Susan Kay novel, which I do not plan to ever read, he's given a name like Nadir Khan or something like that. But like any version that includes him will have to give him a name because he isn't named. The Phantom calls him Daroga, which is apparently, according to Gaston Leroux's notes, the term for a Persian chief of police, or piece of chalif, as Phalis calls it. But they don't really explain that in this version, so when I first heard him call him Daroga, I thought that Daroga was his name, but it's not. It's his title. Weirdly, Raoul here is dressed like Eric from Disney's Little Mermaid. A different Eric that he looks more like than the Eric in this film. So, the area underneath the Opera House is really weird. Like, they don't really walk past any of this stuff in the Schumacher film, which is the only other film adaptation I've watched. Don't at me. But, like, they walk past the furnace where the people are working the boiler, and then there's this thing, which is animated a little too literally than it should be. So this horrifying abomination chasing them is actually the rat catcher, and it's supposed to be that, like, he uses, I guess, the light to attract the rats, and the light from his lantern illuminates his face and makes it look like he's just a flaming head, because everything is dark and you can only see the flaming head lit by the lantern. But here, I guess they took that a little too literally and actually drew him like a floating head, except in that shot, like he's a bubble from the Link to the Past games, especially the design they used in Wind Waker. So, yeah. The lake under the Opera House, by the way, is real. I don't remember why it was built. The house, though, is a bit fanciful. Free solo! Woo! Did you scrape your knee, Raoul? Yeah, you've had a big day. It's, why don't you take 5 and I'll go rescue the girl? Now, I say Daroga is the real hero, and that's kind of true, but it's also kind of not true, because while he is much more competent than Raoul and much braver and much more interesting, he's not really the one who saves the day. He actually just brings Raoul there so that he can witness / not witness Christine saving the day by appealing to the Phantom. And I do kind of like that in principle. You could argue about how well it's actually portrayed, but like the idea that you have these false heroes who go in to save the day and that they fail and that the damsel actually saves the day is an interesting idea. It kind of reminds me of like Rob Walker's comments in regards to the Care Bear movie. He's like, the Care Bears don't do anything. The Care Bears are shit. It's the kids who save the day by appealing to the villain's, humanity.
This wall is a looking glass.
Yes.
Even though I can't see myself in it, it's totally a looking glass.
A looking glass. We have dropped into the torture chamber.
That makes me so hot. This is what you do in your torture chamber. You just kind of grope the wall.
You endanger her.
And us, since we're in the torture chamber, dumbass.
I want to be like other people.
I want to be part of that world.
I have made a mask that makes me look like anybody else. No one will give
So
me a
one of the reasons you got to change this thing when you adapt it is that there are a lot of elements that are just too ridiculous to exist in for audiences to take seriously nowadays. One of the things is that this is actually really funny. When Eric first brings Christine to his underground house, he tells her I'll take care of you, so wait here while I go shopping for the things we need. Yes. He tells her he needs to go shopping to get her stuff. And he actually goes. And hours later, he comes back later with his arms full of presumably groceries. It's wait, you went to the store? I thought you were a total outcast from society. So apparently he's got like a prosthetic nose, like SpongeBob's Groucho Marx glasses, that he can wear to go out in public, which, if that is an option, then why the fuck are you living under the Opera House? If you have the means to go out in public, then you're not really that much of an outcast, are you? I'm so pissed off at this novel that was written in 1910.
I am fastened. I cannot move.
You know, in this version, if they can actually see Christine, she doesn't really need to say that.
Together or die together.
Were you speaking? Did you say something?
No.
I said, let me out of here, you freak.
Cried out.
So I think you could spot it by now, but at some point when they're making this thing, I think the budget ran out because you could tell they reused the same shots of Eric earlier, and there's going to be a lot more reused shots from this point going forward.
Ooh, what's that?
See? Like right there. Why would you start an animation company if you don't have the budget to animate 48 minutes of things?
Quite excited. I think I understand.
I do like that Eric is more expressive than the other characters. It's probably due to his more out there face, but he's like more emotion and more charisma, and like, if the intent, as in the novel, is to make everyone else shittier to make the Phantom look cooler, then thumbs up, I guess. It's kind of a low bar, though.
Then you won't object if I dispose of any intruders.
Do not speak of murder and say you love me at the same time. You are only trying to frighten me. Please,
I thought that line was so good that I thought it was from the novel, but I actually don't think it is. I think that is original line. Do not speak of murder and say that you love me in the same time.
Chamber. You can change all this. Tell me you love me.
Slip the editor some extra cash so they can animate me doing a different pose.
People who did not care for each other before marriage adore each other after. You have until 11. Then we start a ground.
So the time of how long things take in this novel is a little confusing. Here he says 11 o'clock tonight, but in the novel he says 11 o'clock tomorrow night, which means, and yet it still skips ahead while Raoul and the Persian are in there. It's another ridiculous element that has to be cut just because it's stupid. Turn the scorpion to choose me. Like, come on, that's too silly for a James Bond movie. That's like something that would be in Totally Spies.
It is no good. We must...
And now they are reusing shots of me. I only became a major character a few minutes ago, and you're already reusing shots? You couldn't sell cookies door to door to finance this thing?
I knew he would search for you. Surely you didn't.
So there is actually some pretty well done tension in this bit, where Christine is trying to get the key to the torture chamber from Eric without alerting him to the fact that there's anybody in there.
don't hurt him.
But it's not done very well. In this version, Eric just keeps popping in and out of the room. For some reason?
So, the would-be...
Oh, and he also activates the torture chamber without telling Christine that he has done so.
Have you descended from Chief of Persian Police to Nurse Maid?
Nurse, maid,
You
acting.
promised never to interfere with me again.
You know him?
I led you all the way down to his house where he lives at the bottom of the lake, but I've never seen him in my life, Raoul.
At last I
Fucking
found
idiot.
one which was identified as his. I was celebrated and given the pension from which I now live.
So the backstory that Daraga gives here is slightly different from the one in the novel. In this, he says that he was credited with saving Eric's life, only to find out later that he wasn't alive, so he's helping to keep him secret so that he won't lose his pension. In the novel, it's actually that he saved Eric from being executed for knowing too much. And that Eric's body turning up, or what they thought was Eric's body turning up, was the only reason that he was forgiven and was allowed to live off the pension when he was exiled. Perhaps the reason giving this movie makes more sense why the Daraga would be keeping him secret, but it also makes the Daraga more selfish, which is weird because he's supposed to be like the male moral center.
Now, my dear.
I got punched in the eye again, and I better. And I'm leaving again. Where does he keep going? I'm running to McDonald's with my fake nose. Do you want anything? So the torture chamber in the novel is very abstract. Not only does it keyed up, but it uses mirrors and a single fake tree to... Oh, that's the one useful thing Raoul got to do, is he actually found the button into the chamber underneath. He doesn't even do that in the novel. The Dadaga is the one who finds it. But anyway, it's the torture chamber in the novel is supposed to look like a fake forest, so it actually, like, gives the illusion that you're lost in a tropical forest with no water in sight. And then, as the final nail in the coffin after you've spent hours in this place where it's super hot, the chamber uses a rainmaker to imitate the sound of water. So you think there's water so close by, and then you go to get the water, you find that you're in a room with glass, and there is no water. And then that's the point where you use the rope provided to hang yourself. And this leads to the confusing time thing, because apparently Raoul and the Dadaga are in that torture chamber so long that it moves... that by the time they get out, it's minutes before 11 o'clock on the following night, which is the ultimatum that Eric gave Christine. If Christine doesn't decide to marry Eric by 11 o'clock that night, he's going to blow up the opera house with everyone in it.
Please, I will decide. But you must give me the key to the torture chamber.
Choose wisely, and perhaps you will get...
The hilarious thing about this is that, like, you turn the grasshopper, it's like a knob or something, to say no, which will trigger the explosion that will blow the opera house sky high. And to emphasize that you're being blown sky high, I guess, the fandom keeps emphasizing that the... Wait, if you could see through the glass, then why didn't Eric know he was there right away? He keeps saying, like, the grasshopper, I warn you, hops jolly high. That's the wording he uses, jolly high. And the hell of it is, he keeps saying it. Like it's supposed to be chilling or ominous or something. It's like, Eric, jolly high is adorable. Those are adorable words. You're not scaring anybody.
We shall all be blown up. If you turn the scorpion, you will make a present of their lives to so many hundred Parisians. You have one.
So, a criticism that was levied against this novel when it came out was that Eric's face turn at the end where he lets Christine go feels unearned. Like, they don't buy that he would do that. And I would argue it's done even worse here, because there doesn't seem to be an actual reason for Eric to do so. He just kind of sporadically decides to let her go. It's not that well done in the novel either, but at least they give the impression that Eric was not expecting Christine to actually consent to be his wife, and that this was just an excuse to commit murder-suicide with her. So when she actually chooses to live with him, it takes him aback. And then when she actually lets him kiss her again on the forehead, like a wife would do, he realizes he can't go through with it and lets her go. In this, she decides to live with him, which seems to be what he wants and expects, but then out of nowhere he decides, never mind. So it's actually done even worse than it was said was not done well. However, I would also argue that the Phantom Bring Christine is a necessary part of the story. In the 1925 version, the story ends, even though the Phantom was portrayed sympathetically, it ends with an angry mob drowning him. And apparently that ending was not the one that they originally shot. There was an ending where he lets her go, like in the novel, and then dies at his organ. But when they test screened that ending, audiences didn't like it, so they reshot it. They got little shocked. And I think that the fact that that's the ending that audiences in 1925 wanted kind of demonstrates why Gaston Leroux wrote this novel in the first place. So when do they kill him?
You for Raoul's life.
Come here, Christine. For your sake, she does not shrink from my touch.
That is our very weak explanation of why I'm so moved as to let her go.
You and him.
I didn't give you this ring earlier, so this isn't really a payoff to anything.
Poor, unhappy Eric. I know you love the boy. Don't cry anymore.
She wasn't crying. Earlier, she was crying for him, which is, in the novel, which is why he said, "Don't cry anymore."
I have tasted all
And it also,
the world can offer.
it's like quite a bit of time passes before the moment when Christine saves them from the torture chamber to when Eric has announced to Daraga that he's let her go. But here things are moving really fast,
For the first
which I don't think is merely a product of the
and did not die.
running time.
Goodbye.
Runtime. But I think it's just like them not being good at
Opus for you.
pacing. My hat is back on because recycled animation. God, we did not have the money to do this. So I said earlier this is the only animated version of Phantom of the Opera. Apparently some years ago on YouTube, some people started a Kickstarter to make another animated version. And they brag on the Kickstarter page, which I've looked at, that this would be the first full-length animated adaptation of Phantom of the Opera. That version has, like, the Kickstarter for that has not been updated since 2017. So I think that project is dead in the water, like a lot of projects on Kickstarter. Which is a shame, because I looked up the art and stuff for it, and it looks neat. It looks really neat. Like, the art style and the lighting and shit, it looks cool. I especially love the promotional image they use for the, I guess, round 2 of the Kickstarter backing. Depicting Eric looking just very broken. Hey! Someone give me a hug. Please. So I guess what kills Eric in this version is Castlevania rules. You play the organ super hard and it just collapses on top of him.
Poor Eric. All he wanted was someone to love him.
Find me somebody to love. Find me.
Well as feared.
Now he has put himself beyond man's hate. Perhaps God will pity him.
Because I sure don't. Who wants McDonald's? I have a prosthetic nose we can wear. So that was the only animated version of Phantom of the Opera. It's not good. I guess it's the ambition should be admired. I mean, if you don't have the money to make something, but damn it, we're gonna make it anyway. I guess in some way that should be admired, but yeah. Which is a shame because I really would like to see another animated version of this. If, I'd like to see an anime version, actually. Come on, you made anime based on Count of Monte Cristo and Les Miserables and Romeo and Juliet. You can make an anime Phantom. I'd watch it. But, traffic? What do you do if you're traffic? I don't understand that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this with me. This is DragonKeeper96600, signing off. Stay beautiful, folks. And remember, you're never fully dressed without a hideous, sunken-in smile with a great black hole where your nose should be. This ending is getting confused. See you. Have a good night.